Let's bring in Mark McKinnon.
Former advisor to President George W. Bush, Mark McKinnon, joins us now. Mark, the former president making a statement basically saying this country will never give up on justice, and that appears to be the case.
Well, this is such cathartic news across the board. It's great news for what's happened itself, of course, but I'm also struck by how great it feels that it doesn't feel political. You know, this feels like the first time in maybe 10 years since, you know, this is not a Democratic thing, it's not a Republican thing, it's not a George W. Bush thing, it's not a President Obama thing. This is great for the country, and I just think everybody feels great about who we are collectively as a country and what we've accomplished here. And you know, I had the great luck of being with Wounded Warriors and President Bush this last week in Big Bend, Texas, and 14 amputees rode their bikes 100 kilometers across the desert. And I'm just thinking today about how they must feel and all they've sacrificed for our country. So this is a great moment, and it's not a political moment. That's what I'm struck by. I saw President Bush was out immediately with a great positive message. So, you know, this is one of the few times when we're talking this morning where it's, you know, it's not a harsh political partisan message, and that feels great.
And Mark, you know President Bush very well. You've been friends with him for a very long time. Explain to people about the Bush you know, and about the fact that unlike certain politicians, and I'm just, again, I've had some very harsh criticism for George W. Bush over the years, but talking to you, I think it's pretty easy to conclude that he is not gritting his teeth like some politicians, that this didn't happen on his watch. As you've said, for all the flaws that I may think he had as a leader, he doesn't have that flaw as a person. He wanted this job done.
Absolutely. It's never been political or personal for him. He's only wished President Obama the very best, even through the transition. It was very diplomatic, and as you know, he's kept himself off the radar screen because he wanted to allow President Obama the room to govern without President Bush being inside of his business, criticizing what he's doing. And I assure you this morning that nobody feels as good about this as President Bush does. I mean, this is a real no labels kind of moment. This is not about politics. It's not about partisanship. It's not about who won or lost. It's about a collective achievement that was started by President Bush and finished by President Obama, and for that we can all cheer.
Well, you know, Mike Barnacle, for years conservatives have liked to say that Ronald Reagan won the Cold War. It was a Cold War begun by Harry S. Truman, and it was a Cold War concluded by George H.W. Bush. Nobody won the Cold War. You look back over the sweep of the 50 or so years, and it was just a collective, a collection of decisions, wise decisions made by wise men from the Truman administration to the Bush administration, then into the Cold War. And here, you know, I think Republicans should stand up and certainly salute Barack Obama for making some very tough choices that his own base did not want him to make. That takes courage. That takes leadership. And we saw the results of that courage and leadership saying no to his own base yesterday.
Well, and the president's phrase, at my direction. That's how this operation was conducted successfully, at my direction, in the words of President Obama. It was his decision. Last night, early this morning in Times Square, 2 o'clock in the morning, there were no conservatives. Right. There were no liberals. There were what was on every street in every town and city in America on September 12th, 2001. There were Americans infused with the spirit of this country that I think has been missing or diminished over the past 9 or 10 years. And to Mark's point, this is one of the healthiest things that has happened to this country.
All right, we have Mike Allen and Tom Brokaw coming up in just a moment. Richard Haas, real quick.
Timing could not have been better, though, for Barack Obama. He's been criticized over Libya. The phrase has begun to take hold, leading from behind. This is a situation where essentially he can claim he led from ahead. It's a very good development for him and for this country's foreign policy.
With us now, Chief White House Correspondent for Politico, Mike Allen. Politico has an exclusive look this morning at a heart-pounding moment in the Situation Room during the raid on bin Laden's compound. Mike, what happened?
Yeah, well, Mika, officials tell us that they'd actually done 2 rehearsals for this raid in April, able to monitor exactly what was happening back here in Washington in the Situation Room. The raid went back 4 years ago that they first identified this courier. 2 years ago, they learned his name, followed him back to this compound where they realized that it was so suspicious. You were talking about how big it is. Also, the fact that the people inside burned their trash. The fact that there was no cable or internet service going into it. So the president finally decided to do this raid. Originally, the first option that he was presented was a bombing. The president decided not to do a bombing. He wanted proof that Osama bin Laden had been taken out. He didn't want 20 civilian casualties, which they were able to avoid. So after they drew up the plan for this helicopter raid, which was much riskier, much more daring, they roped in, and it was about 3:30 p.m. Eastern time yesterday when this happened. It had been pushed off one day because of weather. Originally, it was going to be Saturday night. 3:30 p.m. our time, they rope in. The helicopter malfunctions. They set it down in the compound. Back in Washington, people are thinking Black Hawk Down, very worried about what was happening both to our guys and to what was going to happen to this mission. They went ahead with the raid, not knowing if they were going to have a ride out of there. While they were doing it, including the firefight with Osama, who fired back, including ransacking the place for every scrap of possible intelligence. We could also assume that they took any computer hard drives, anything like that was there. They got all of it. Very valuable intelligence. While they were doing that, the replacement chopper came, and they were able to leave with Osama bin Laden now buried at sea. The administration didn't want any possibility that there would be some sort of shrine to terrorism that would grow around him.
Hey, Mike, based on your reporting, and maybe Richard can answer this too, will we see, as we did with Saddam Hussein and with his sons, a photograph, some evidence that we can show the world, here is Osama bin Laden dead? Because right now you could already hear people saying, well, we never saw it. Oh, sure, you put him out to sea. Will we see some evidence of his death?
I would suggest yes, because there will be people out there who won't believe it. This is the conspiracy world we live in. So at some point, I would think there will be documentary evidence in a way that will hopefully not be more inflammatory.
A photograph of his body.
Something that would basically try to once and for all put to rest the idea that somehow he still lives, he's still out there.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the reasons for the delay between the 4:15 p.m. Eastern Time conclusion of the raid, it took about 40 minutes, and the president's speech to the nation around 11:30 p.m. Eastern Time was they wanted to identify him conclusively. They did it with DNA, but they also did it with photographs, matching photographs of the face they got with photographs that we knew were of bin Laden. You can bet we will see those photographs.
All right, Mike Allen, thank you so much.
Mike.
Great coverage.
I thank you so much.